Welcome to week 3 of English 105. So this week I'm going to talk more in detail about APA. And so APA, as I mentioned in the week 1 lecture, stands for American Psychological Association. And so when we cite sources in APA, we always want to cite historical data, medical data, anything with numbers, numerical, percentages. So I gave a few examples in the week 1 lecture where I said 85% of Americans are overweight. So then I would put quotation marks, and then right after the citation I would put in the author and the date and the page number. There are many ways to write a citation, and you either can have you would directly cite the source word per word exactly as the researcher had written it. That's known as a direct quote, when you just say it word per word and you don't change a word from the source. Okay, that's a direct quote. That's one way of writing to cite your source. Second way is called a paraphrase quote. In a paraphrase quote, you summarize in your own words the direct quote. So paraphrase quote for the majority of Americans weigh too much or have a large body mass. The majority, in other words, if I want to paraphrase and say in my own words, 85% of Americans are obese, then I would say in my own words, the majority of Americans are more overweight or have large body weight mass than they did 20 years ago. So that would be a paraphrase quote, where you summarize in your own words what the source said. But even if you summarize the quote in your own words, you still need to cite the source, because you still have to tell the reader, well, how did you know that a majority of Americans are overweight? Where did you get that information from? So that is a common mistake among students, in that they think that if they said it in their own words, then they don't have to cite the source. But you always have to cite the source. The difference being is that when you write a paraphrase quote, you don't need quotation marks, and you just have to have the author and the date, and that's it. When you have a direct quote, you need quotation marks, then you need the author, date, and page number. So that would be a direct quote. So I'll repeat it once again. A direct quote is when you cite the source word per word. Then you need to put the direct quote in quotation marks. Then you have to write the author, the date, and the page number. When you have a paraphrase quote, you don't need any quotation marks. You just write in that Dr. Smith cited, or Dr. Smith says or states that most Americans weigh too much, or most Americans are overweight. And then you would write the date. So you would write the author's name and the date. You don't need the page number for the paraphrase quote. A third, and each of your in-text citations, whether it be a direct quote or a paraphrase quote, should be less than 3 lines. If your citation is more than 3 lines, then you have what's called a block quotation. In a block quotation, remember that when we write a paragraph, we're indenting 5 spaces, right? Then with a block quotation, you're going to indent it 5 more spaces, and you're going to use single space. So that way you're going to have a paragraph within a paragraph. That's known as a block quotation. So if you're going to take a large chunk of somebody's source that is more than 3 lines, then you have something called a block quotation. I always try to not have my students use block quotations too much, because when you use too many block quotations, it disrupts the flow of your paper. But it's good to know that if you need to have a really long quotation, or it's really necessary, let's say you're trying to cite a part of a play and you need to cite, say, a scene or something, then you would use block quotation. So block quotation is for long citations for your paper. So I just went over a direct quote where you cite the source word per word, and then you have the date, the author, the date, and the page number, and then the paraphrase quote where you just have the author and the date. How many citations should you have in a paragraph? I tell students to use just one citation per paragraph. Now, those of you who've taken my English 101 class should be familiar with pie structure. So if I had students in my class right now, I would ask my former English 101 students, okay, students, I taught you this in English 101. What is pie structure? And then I would have them remember from the previous class. Pie structure means that we only use one in-text citation per paragraph so that we don't overwhelm the reader with so many citations. Also, if you use too many citations in your paper, you risk getting a high plagiarism score. Now, I'm going to talk more about how to read a Turnitin report and plagiarism and what the plagiarism policy and what plagiarism means in my next, in week 4 lecture. So, what is pie structure? So, P stands for the main point from the thesis statement. So that means that the first sentence of your body paragraph is going to be that topic sentence that relates back to your thesis. So that's P for main point, your topic sentence. I stands for in-text citation. That means you have your one in-text citation in which you would say 85% of Americans are overweight. Okay, so that's your one in-text citation in which you have the quotation marks. And usually if you're using numbers, that's a direct quote, okay, because you're not the one that came up with the numbers. The researcher came up with that exact number. So if you're going to cite a number, always cite the source as a direct quote. And then have the author, the date, the page number. So you got your one in-text citation. So P is the main point. Then you've got your one or two sentence in-text citation. Now the rest of your body paragraph, the other 5 sentences, you're going to write about what does that in-text citation mean? How does that apply to this essay? So if I were to say, in North America, most Americans eat too much junk food. So that would be my topic sentence. And then that's P for main point. 85% of Americans are overweight. Dr. Smith, 2022, page 55. And that's it. No web addresses. You don't have to put anything like that except for your until we do the reference citation. I'll go over that in a second. Then you write your 5 sentences. So you would about the in-text citation. So E for pie structure. E stands for an explanation of that in-text citation in 5 sentences. So then the rest of my paragraph, I simply talk about since most Americans eat too much junk food usually has so many calories, and it's many more calories because junk food has all these chemicals to preserve the food. And so as a result, people overeat the junk food, and then they end up gaining so many calories, and then most Americans are more overweight than ever. And then 20 years ago, people were like 20 pounds lighter than they are now. Okay, so that particular little thing, that's another in-text. Okay, I made a mistake. So anyway, you're just supposed to write 5 sentences about why 85% of Americans are overweight. People eat too much junk food. The junk food has too many calories. People sit around the couch, and also if you watch a lot of television and you don't do enough exercise, that's why Americans, so on and so on. So therefore, I fill the rest of my body paragraph with those 5 sentences, and you just have that one in-text citation per paragraph. So that's known as pie structure. Why do we only have one in-text citation per paragraph? That means that your paper has more original thought. The more original thought you have in your paper, the lower your plagiarism score is going to be, and therefore the better your paper is going to be. Okay, you don't want to have a plagiarism score of 50%, where 50% of your paper is, because I've had papers where people write, and 55% of this, and did you know that 20% of that, and 2% of this. In other words, every other sentence is an in-text citation. And what happens is that the reader tunes it out. The human brain can only handle one or two different facts at a time. And after that, the human brain goes like that. So you don't want your reader to tune out. And so therefore, we only use one in-text citation per paper. Reference citation. What is a reference citation? How is a reference citation different from an in-text citation? Your APA in-text citation occurs inside the body of your body paragraph. Meanwhile, the reference citation is at the end of your paper, after the last page. So for your APA paper, you're going to write references. Then in alphabetical order, you're going to list all of the references that you used for the paper. And therefore, your reference citation should match your in-text citation, okay? So therefore, Smith, Smith, Lee, Lee, Jones, Jones. So everything should match. And so when we write a reference citation, we write the author's name first, then we write the date, then we write the article name, then we write then we write the name of the publication, and then we write the date that we retrieved the website, and last but not least, we write the web address. We don't just simply write the web address inside the body of the paper. I've seen that mistake so many times in both the schools that I teach, you see. So when we write the in-text citation, we only need the author name, the author last name actually. You don't have to put the full name. Just write Smith 2022, page 55. Then when you write the reference citation at the end of the paper, that's when you write Smith Paul J. Last name first, then the first name, then his initial. And 2022, in other words, the date of when you wrote of the publication. Then you would write in italicized. You would write the name of the article, the America and overweight or something or whatever it is. Okay, obesity problem in the United States, for instance. So that would be in italicized. And after each part, you got to have a period, two spaces, period. So you would write the author's name, then period, two spaces, then you write your date, and then you write the article name, period, two spaces, publication name, period, two spaces, date you retrieved the website, and then you write the web address, retrieved at, that sort of thing. But so don't worry, I will be giving you plenty of examples when we discuss all of this in the forums. And if you've taken any of my previous classes, such as English 115 or English 101, you know that I will post a lot of other videos in your forums so that you can see, well, what does this reference citation look like? But if you want to see what a APA paper looks like, you can buy the APA manual, or you can Google these exact words: Diane Hacker, sample APA paper. Just those exact words, Diane Hacker, sample APA paper, and then you can download that APA paper, and then that sample paper will show you what an APA in-text citation looks like, and at the back of the paper it will show you what a reference list looks like in alphabetical order, where you're going to use special left hanging indent. You can Google that, how to put that in your Microsoft Word. Okay, so that pretty much rounds out. And so when you write your research paper, you need to use the 5-paragraph essay structure that I taught you in English 101. And so the 5-paragraph essay structure, so this is English 101 in a nutshell. My English 101 students know from the back of their hand Yes, the thesis statement is the first sentence of the last paragraph, and then the first sentence of the last paragraph. So let me repeat that. Your thesis statement is the last sentence of the first paragraph. The thesis statement is the roadmap to your entire paper. Then each of your topic sentences will relate back to the thesis statement. And then you repeat the thesis statement as the first sentence of the last paragraph. So your paper is going to follow the same pattern, except that we're going to also add in counter-argument paragraph and rebuttal paragraph, either inside the body paragraphs or as a separate entity. You have no idea what I just said, but that's going to be covered in a future lecture about how to insert the 2 extra paragraphs, or how to insert the other side into your argument. And I think that this book, I don't know if this shows. Yeah, there you go. This book has many templates on how you can insert many different kinds of counter-argument and rebuttal, and we're going to go over those templates also at a later lecture. So this lecture, I just want to go over direct quote, paraphrase quote, in-text citations, and block quotations, as well as pie structure and 5-paragraph essay structure. So, and there are many different ways to write an in-text citation. So if you want to look up different ways to write an in-text citation, you would have to Google signal phrases. Signal phrases, so you don't have to keep saying, Dr. Smith says, Dr. Smith says, Dr. Smith says. It's very redundant. So a signal phrases will show you a variety of ways in which you can say, Dr. Smith says. You could say, according to Dr. Smith indicates, Dr. Smith emphasizes, Dr. Smith agrees. There are many different ways to say the same thing so that your paper doesn't become boring. So Google signal phrases to find out many different ways to state your direct quote and many different ways to state your paraphrase quote. So that wraps up the week 3 lecture. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. Let's see. You can always email me, and let's see if I recorded this correctly. Yes. So if you have any questions, you can email me about APA. And then next week, I'm going to cover plagiarism. What is plagiarism? How do you avoid plagiarism? What exactly is self-plagiarism, which is what students get confused about? How is it that I wrote the paper and still plagiarism? How do you do that? So I'll go over plagiarism next week and how to read the Turnitin score, which I've only mentioned in the last 3 lectures as you want a low Turnitin score. You don't want a high one, you want a low one. The more original thought you have in your paper, the better your paper is. So, and you can also, that's right, and you can also call me for one-on-one phone call appointments. So you can email me for those. So if you have any questions about APA, email me.